we'll start with this. In light of this past weekend's action in the women's lightweight division, what was the Beatriz Ferreira versus Yanina Lescano fight, who is fast becoming her rival, fellow Olympian Caroline Dubois took to her social media and stated, "Ow! I'm feeling a bit snackish. Let's see what Matchroom Boxing has on the menu for me today." To which a Twitter user that goes by the name Bodhi said, "Look at the menu as much as you like, but Shalom isn't going to let you order." Highlighting the pattern of fights, the pattern of purse bids involving Matchroom and boxer fighters that Ben Shalom has pulled his boxer fighters out of. Frazier Clark versus Fabio Wortley, one Matchroom was involved. Richard Riakpour versus Jayo Pataya in this fight. Don't forget about what was supposed to be Adam Azim versus Dalton Smith. And Caroline Dubois versus Beatriz Ferreira, what was supposed to be for the IBF title that Beatriz fought for yesterday. Caroline Dubois, responding to Bodhi's comment, said, "Don't worry, I've already placed mine." Sounds good. You know, before it became about Ferreira versus Lescano, it was about Ferreira versus Dubois. And Ben Shalom, wait a minute, before that, wasn't it about Dixon versus Dubois? Yeah, it was, but Rhiannon Dixon went in a different direction. She decided to fight for the WBO title instead, as I've said in many, many videos. Caroline don't keep the same energy. She don't keep the same energy for Rhiannon Dixon that she keeps for Beatriz Ferreira. She has no energy for Beatriz Ferreira. Caroline, who said, "Yeah, that one looks tasty." It's not convincing. To which that same Twitter user that goes by the name Bodhi responded, "Did you place your order for the fighter on tonight's card that you were ordered to fight 2 months ago and Shalom pulled you out from?" It's becoming more and more noticeable to more and more people that Caroline and Ben jointly, they don't want to do that Ferreira fight. It's not just this Bodhi guy that chimed in on it. If you go over to Caroline Dubois' Twitter account and you peruse through the comment section under these same posts, what you will find is a lot of skeptical individuals that don't buy into this gamesmanship that Caroline is exhibiting, that underneath it all, the bravado and just all of that, she doesn't want to fight Beatriz because if she did, she could have fought her. Nobody forgot. What I expect Caroline Dubois and Ben Shalom to do is put distance between themselves and that fight. Even if Beatriz Ferreira has been crowned IBF champion, they're not pressed about winning that title. There are 2 other titles they might shoot for that don't require them to deal with Beatriz because they don't want to deal with Beatriz. It's a high risk, low reward. They figure Beatriz is several years older than Caroline Dubois. Beatriz is what, 31? Whereas Caroline, she's in her early 20s. They've got time. Put simply, I think they would rather drag this out for several years. And I do mean years, because I think it is their intention to age out Beatriz Ferreira before they ever set foot in the ring with her. It's not that I don't like Caroline Dubois. I do. I think she's one of the best unbeaten up-and-comers coming through, but I don't have any illusions about her, Ben Shalom, or their demeanor towards what is a very dangerous fight for them right now. They don't want that fight. The saving grace for Beatriz is that she plans on going back to the amateurs in the immediate future to see if she can't win Olympic gold. She won the silver the last time. She wants to win the gold this time. So that's what she's going to be doing in the immediate future. Upon her return, the fighter in the pole position to become her mandatory challenger is Serbia's own Jelena Janicevic. She's ranked at number 2. Yanina Lescano, who Beatriz just dispatched, she's ranked at number 3. South Korea's own Bomi Shin, she's ranked at number 4. Katharina Thanders of Norway, she's ranked at number 5. That upon Beatriz's return, she could end up fighting any one of these fighters. Since Caroline don't want any problems. Beatriz's lightweight contest wasn't the only lightweight contest that took place this weekend. Canada's own Jessica Kamara traveled to South Korea to take on Hyun Mi Choi, who she upset on her own home turf, on her own home soil, for what was the gold version of the WBA title at this same weight, which in theory lines up Jessica to potentially fight for the full title at some point. That's another fight that Beatriz could pursue. So even if Caroline Dubois doesn't want the smoke, as they say, there are some alternatives, some other options out there for Beatriz Ferreira upon her return from the Olympics. We'll see what happens. Elsewhere in the world of boxing, more details are coming out as it pertains to Derrick James's lawsuit against his former fighter Errol Spence Jr. An interesting part of the Derrick James versus Errol Spence lawsuit on February 13th of 2024, Mr. Spence and Mr. James spoke for the first time about the guaranteed amount Mr. Spence received for the Crawford fight. During that conversation, and for the first time in their 11-year professional relationship, Mr. Spence asserted that Mr. James was not entitled to receive 10% of his guaranteed purse, that someone named Al told him that paying James $350,000 for the Crawford fight in exchange for his training services was quote-unquote generous. Someone named Al Heyman? Why am I not surprised? Spence had paid James $350,000 rather than $2.5 million, the standard 10% trainer's fee from his $25 million purse for facing Crawford. In text messages provided as evidence, Mr. Spence said he was man enough and honest and truthful enough to admit that following the Crawford fight, he did rob Mr. James by paying him $350,000, and he had to own up to it. Mr. Spence acknowledged that it was his wrong, and he had to own up to his shit. How long has he been robbing this guy blind at the request of Al Heyman? Boxing insider Rick Glacier said there's a lot of talk around the boxing business about Derrick James having filed a lawsuit against Spence for money owed for services rendered. If what's been said is true, that Spence's advisor Al Heyman told Spence not to pay Derrick James any more than he did already pay James, that's a real low-life scoundrel move by Heyman. But I'm not at all surprised. In some ways I am, and in some ways I'm not. I'm not surprised that Al Heyman might be behind all of this because I've long maintained that he's a crook, a shyster, a con man, and a false idol to a lot of boxing fans in the boxing community at large that don't know the ball from the bounce, that have so deified Al Heyman due to his works with Floyd Mayweather when he's not the one that built Floyd Mayweather and made him the fighter he became. By the time that Al Heyman comes into the career of Floyd Mayweather, Floyd's a finished product. He's already a world-class fighter, but that's neither here nor there. Let's not lose focus. No, I'm not surprised that Al Heyman could be behind this, but I am surprised that Errol would have went along with it, because Errol's relationship with Derrick James predates his relationship with Al Heyman and his time at the PBC. Hell, Errol's relationship with Derrick James predates him even going pro. It started in the amateurs. That's how long Derrick James has been involved in this fighter's career, going all the way back to the amateurs when Errol Spence Jr. was very young on the U.S. national team. It was Errol's father that put him and Derrick together, you know. That's how it started in Errol's amateur days, so that so many years later, he could screw over the guy that's been in the picture from the very beginning. At Al Heyman's request. Where Al Heyman would not have come into it, presumably, until Errol jumps into bed with Golden Boy Promotions. People tend to forget that those PBC guys that became PBC guys, many of them were Golden Boy Promotions guys first. And Errol was one among them. I'm going to assume that's where he met Al Heyman. We all know what happened. Al Heyman funneled a fuck ton of fighters over from Golden Boy Promotions to his PBC, him and Richard Schaefer. Thus, the nature of the lawsuit is revealed. Derrick James, and as far as he knew, he was working on an honor system with Errol Spence Jr., trusting that he was being paid appropriately. But he must have been exceptionally bad at math. You see, Derrick has been with Errol from the very beginning, before pay-per-view and before pay-per-view upsides even came into it. So if you enter into a verbal agreement that you're gonna get 10% of this guy's purse, when you made the deal, that couldn't have been factoring in the upside of a pay-per-view because Errol wasn't on pay-per-view. So once again, Derrick James would have to be exceptionally bad at math to have been there all this time and not put two and two together that this guy is not being honest with you sooner. Much sooner. Because he's been on pay-per-view 4 times. 4 times in the last 4 or 5 years, I want to say, and you're just now figuring this out. Wow. Why would Al Heyman think it at all generous that Errol gave him only $350,000 for training him for the Crawford fight? Probably because he lost. Probably because Al Heyman blames Derrick James in some way, way, shape, or form for how that fight played out. I'm just bouncing ideas around. I'm just brainstorming. But if the story is as it's presented, and Al Heyman is in any way, shape, or form responsible for Errol not paying Derek all of his money, well, it's no less than I expect, and it's further indication of what I've been telling you all along.
Al Heyman is a scumbag and a false idol.
You only elevated him to this position as boxing's Wizard of Oz based on the success that he had with a fighter that someone else groomed,
Bob.
that someone else built,
Errol.
telling yourself fairy tales about how great Al Heyman is to his fighters.
What a great guy he is.
In what is one of the more extreme and bizarre cases of hero worship I've ever seen in the sport, but that's how these things go. And super middleweight news, next weekend, Canelo Alvarez will be defending his undisputed crown against his countryman, Jaime Munguia, and unbeaten up-and-comer of Canada, Christian Mbilli, anticipates it'll be an easy win against Munguia.
That's how some people feel.
I think Munguia will need to use a lot of pressure. Mbilli responded to how Munguia could beat Canelo. He will need a really good defense. He'll have to stay focused and move his head the whole fight. I hope he has good conditioning. That's it. That's all he can do. Canelo will make his fourth consecutive defense of his undisputed crown against Munguia, a former junior middleweight champion who has his third straight fight at super middleweight. Some people
like the fight, some people don't. Some people think Munguia can make it interesting, others think it's going to be an easy fight for Canelo. That's what Christian Mbilli thinks. That is what boxing scribe at Boxing Scene Owen Lewis seems to think, as he wrote an article recently stating Canelo Alvarez is done taking on tough fights. Is this supposed to be an easy one? What's interesting
Is if it weren't Canelo Alvarez fighting Jaime Munguia this weekend, if it were Jermall Charlo, if it were Demetrius Andrade,
David Benavidez or Edgar Berlanga.
hell, if it were Christian Mbilli, who's saying this is going to be an easy fight for Canelo, if it were any one of them instead of Canelo, what would the story be then? How would people describe the fight then? The critical ones criticizing Canelo Alvarez.
What would people say?
You'll find in the sport of boxing that a lot of people are quite wishy-washy. But Christian continued, he doesn't have a very good chin, Mbilli added of Munguia. He doesn't like pressure, and I don't think he can take a punch that well. I think Canelo can knock him out if he wants to, but I think Canelo is having some trouble to stop any boxer. Look at his last three fights. He had a lot of trouble. So I don't know if Canelo can stop him because he's on his way down. I still think it will be quite an easy fight for Canelo. He's the better fighter. He should knock him out, but it will be a very easy win for Canelo if he doesn't knock him out.
I think what he's saying is that one way or another, knockout or no knockout, it should be an easy night's work for Canelo. But will it?
A lot of the fighters that Canelo Alvarez has been fighting, these are taller, longer fighters that hope to use their height and use their length to keep Canelo Alvarez out while they are on the move. I mean, look at the fight that Jermall Charlo fought.
That wasn't fighting, that was running.
You know, Jermall Charlo, he stayed on his toes. In a manner of speaking, so did Dimitri Bivol, using his height and using his length, boxing on his toes, in and out, putting punches together, then getting out before Canelo could counter.
He boxed him.
Think about Caleb Plant. Think about Callum Smith. Think about Billy Joe Saunders. These are not guys that stood in the pocket with Canelo Alvarez and made it a fight.
They tried to box him.
With John Ryder, it was a bit different. You know, John is a mid-range to inside pressure guy. He is a gutting and gritty fighter.
Right.
Though he is a smaller guy, he doesn't have Jaime's physical dimensions, that Jaime is noticeably taller than Canelo Alvarez, noticeably younger.
Right.
And I guess what I'm getting at is John Ryder could only push Canelo Alvarez, but so much. Can Jaime Munguia push him a little more? Because Jaime Munguia, he is a mauler, he is a brawler, he is a mid-range to inside fighter, a young one, an aggressive one, and certainly fresher than Canelo Alvarez, who's 33 going on 34.
Something like that.
I'll be honest with you that I ain't got a problem with the fight.
No.
I ain't got a problem with Canelo Alvarez fighting this guy, and how easy it is or how easy it isn't all depends on whether Canelo Alvarez is on the slide, because that's what people have been saying, that Canelo Alvarez, he's on the back nine, he's in decline, he's slowing down.
Don't.
If he is, then this weekend's fight might prove to be more difficult than some people realize. We'll see, and that's a part of the intrigue.
It's a part of why I like it.
5 out of the last 6 guys that Canelo Alvarez fought, 5 out of the 6 were boxing him. They weren't pushing him or taking it to him.
Not really.
That's Callum Smith, that's Caleb Plant, that's Billy Joe Saunders,
It's Bivol.
that's Jermel Charlo.
They were boxing him. They weren't trying to knock him out.
Now, John Ryder, he might have put his best foot forward, tried to take it to Canelo as best as he could, but there's only so much that guy could do. Whereas maybe Jaime can push Canelo in a way that he hasn't been pushed in a long time.
Give us the answers we need. Is Canelo Alvarez on the slide or not?
Push him harder than John Ryder could push him. That's why all of these criticisms that this fight is getting don't make any sense to me, because if it were someone else fighting that same Jaime Munguia, these guys wouldn't criticize those fights. Andrade versus Munguia, or Charlo versus Munguia, Benavidez versus Munguia,
Mbilli versus Munguia.
Edgar Berlanga versus Jaime Munguia, Bektemir Melenkuziev versus Jaime Munguia. For a lot of these guys, the name of Jaime Munguia would quite literally be the best name on their entire resume, and the best fighter they've ever fought, so that when Canelo fights him, you want to deprive him of credit.
You want to be critical.
That sounds like a double standard to me, and it was the great coach Malachi that once said, if not for these guys' brazen double standards, they'd have no standards at all.
So cut the fucking crap.
There is reason enough to believe that Canelo Alvarez, after something like over 60 professional bouts and having been a professional since 15 years old, he just doesn't have the same fire in the belly that he used to, or the same ability, and this weekend's fight could answer those questions. Is Canelo Alvarez on the slide or not? Because depending on if he is or he isn't,
This weekend's fight might be very easy or very difficult.
outside of the ring, Jaime Munguia may not be as talkative or brash and brazen as some of these other fighters. Outside of the ring, he's a rather polite young man, but inside the ring, he goes for the knockout. He goes for the knockout more than those other guys do.
And don't forget that he has Freddie Roach in his corner now. This will be his second fight with Freddie Roach.
We all saw noticeable improvements in Jaime Munguia's approach in his very last fight, what was his first fight with Freddie Roach, a more measured approach and usage of the jab. What improvements might he show this weekend that make for a hard time for Canelo Alvarez?
We'll see.